Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amyr Rocha-Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland Hahn Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Hahn Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Nick Tudor. Nick is the senior skipper at Turks River Cruises, a 310-year-old family-run Thames River boat company. What's unique about Nick is how he pivoted from an electrical engineering degree to following his passion for being on the water, first by becoming a dive master, and then by working his way to earning his boatmaster's license. And be sure to listen to the end, where Nick shares with us some tips on how you can enjoy our stretch of the River Thames too. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the world of river cruises, or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, Nick Tudor, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Nick, I'm really excited about this conversation because, well, Turks River Cruises, well, it definitely is an iconic feature on our part of the river here in Kingston, with some beautiful boats that we get the pleasure of seeing going up and down the Thames there. And I think that myself and our listeners can learn a lot from your experience, not only from being on the river and seeing Kingston from that perspective on a regular basis, but also because of the work you do and obviously showcasing the area to tourists and to visitors as well. But before we kick off this conversation, Nick, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So, Nick, where did you grow up?
So I was born in Roehampton, so I'm a relatively local lad, and I spent my early years a combination of Thames Ditton, Tolworth, Surbiton.
Yeah, very local indeed.
Yeah, but I did also spend a lot of time on the south coast as well, due to the old broken home syndrome. I spent a lot of time on the south coast, down on the water, in Hampshire. I was either on the river or I was sailing around.
Awesome.
So it was nice upbringing. It was good.
Yeah, for sure. And what did you study after secondary school?
So one of my secrets that I try not to tell too many people was that I attended Southampton and did electronic engineering at Southampton University. But I wasn't very good at it, which is why I now run a boat company.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to define what would classify as good in electronic engineering, but that's such a broad subject. You could go into so many different fields, even becoming the senior skipper at a boat company.
Quite right. Exactly.
Very cool. And Nick, could you tell us a little bit about your career journey before you started working at Turks?
Blimey, there isn't much of one, actually, to be perfectly honest. So Richard Turk, my boss, I got to know him. He was 5 or 6 years above me at school, and we played rugby together in old boys team, the school old boys team, after I left senior school, and he bullied me into coming to work for him one summer while I was back from uni. And I started off actually in Hampton Court Flower Show, which is coming up. And after a couple of spells away, about 15 years later, here we are. So although I had a few jobs, I did a lot of diving. So recreational diving, helping as a dive master. I travelled for a year and had some pretty cool jobs in Australia, doing like bungee jumping and working in the hostel and stuff like that. But it was always generally based around water. So I've always had that tie, either working on the water or underneath it when I was a dive master, always on the water. I can't seem to stay away.
Yeah. So, Nick, I definitely want to sort of pull a few threads out of that with you in this conversation, some of which is to do with the history of Turks as a company, because I think it's really interesting. But before I do that, obviously, I already mentioned there that you're the senior skipper at Turks. And for our listeners, including myself, who aren't too familiar with the different roles of a boat crew, I understand that there's a lot of responsibility attached to that role, but could you just paint the picture a little bit for us as to how you even get there? And then when you're there, what sort of responsibilities fall upon you?
You might not have enough time, because talking about a boatmaster and being a skipper is something which I could probably go on about and bore you to the cows come home. So for me, I am actually colourblind. So I never really thought, which is, again, hilarious for an electronic engineer, because lots of red and green wires. I never really thought I would stay in the passenger vessel business. It was something which I enjoyed, but because of the restrictions, I didn't see really that I had a future in it, which was sad because I loved doing it. But then a couple of mates of mine from further downriver on the water, they got diagnosed as colourblind and were still making a really good career out of it. So I said, hey, if they can do it, then I want to do it too. So then I put some effort in, got you've got a tier system in the boatmaster world. So I got firstly what is kind of like the junior type of local license, which is the Thames, Teddington upwards. And then I've recently, 2 years ago, got the full national license. So there's a lot of hard work, a lot of practical, theoretical training. It's quite a difficult exam to take, but it's worthwhile when you get it. So that was my kind of journey, really. I decided I was going to do it, and about 5 years later, two certificates later, here we are.
Very cool. And could you tell us a little bit about the work that you do with Turks River Cruises today?
The work?
Yeah.
Again, sadly, due to COVID, there was a lot of downsizing which happened. So a lot of people lost their jobs, which was pretty sad. A lot of people I've known with and worked with for a really long time. Some people that have seen the company have been there and grown with it for 25 years. So it was a pretty devastating time. But some hard decisions were made, and I was one of the people that got kept on. But there's now only 3 of us full-time, and the rest are all casual, 0 hours, part-time staff. Luckily, some who previously were let go, who we've managed to hire back, which is a small success story in itself. As you will guess, times are still hard and it's tight, but we're trying to make it work as best as possible. But because of that, the amount of work that we do has become, it's a wide net to cast. So I skipper the boats, crew training, MCA, so Maritime and Coast Guard Agency audits, and because being a boat company, there's an awful lot of legislation you've got to cover. So I do website updates as well, which is some coding experience. It's very, very basic, and my website developer is extremely patient with me, but he helps me out quite a lot. So yeah, pretty much as a small business, when you're a general manager, as I was previously, but when you're just everything, viewings, charters, training, cleaning, not too proud to get my hands dirty still, bit of maintenance, as well on the side. It's just everything really. Absolutely. Pretty intense. Absolutely. It keeps me busy.
Yeah, and what I love about that is because in my own field and in our own company, I feel the exact same way as you mentioned there. And I think that at least 95% of every guest I've had here on the show have said a similar thing. It's when push comes to shove, there are just a whole bunch of hats that one needs to or can wear because they find themselves, similar to you with myself. I also help with some ideas around our IT system, ideas around our website system, just because I'm familiar with that. I'm not a master coder or anything like that, but I'm more familiar with that than, say, a colleague of mine. So why not put that hat on when that hat needs to be put on, so to speak, in the business? So no, for sure, this is a common thread in these conversations. I wanted to sort of ask you, Nick, about your perspective of Kingston, or this stretch of the river that you are more familiar with, of course, because you've just done it that much more times. But the perspective of it from being on the river. I bet you get to see some pretty special wildlife and maybe just a different way of looking at Kingston because of that perspective of being on the river instead of in Kingston walking and looking at the river following it.
It's funny you should say that, because I really wish that I could go back or wipe the slate clean and look at my stretch of river with a fresh pair of eyes. Because I see it every day, all day. I sometimes do wonder whether I miss, the natural beauty of it all and just become acclimatized to it. I'll go to a different stretch of river, or I'll go to a different, city, or not recently, but a different country and go on a boat trip and think, wow, that's awesome. And then people come to our stretch of river and go, wow, that's awesome. And I'm just there going, I guess it's cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I kind of wish I could go back in time and see that again. But I still There's one. We're quite lucky with the spot where we've got down at Town End Pier. The sun sets directly opposite, and almost every day you will get some form of nice sunset. And no matter how hard a day it's been, I can just sit there and look at it and think, yeah, it's not so bad. There are worse places to work. But yeah, I've had some pretty cool times, seeing various things up and down the river, seeing it change as well. I mean, I remember when I started like 15 years ago, and as I've been around the area, the riverside just wasn't anything like it was now. It was extremely underused, and the Kingston First and all the development that they've done along that riverside, making it so much more vibrant and more active, just wonderful.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think that our listeners who have lived in the area for a long, long time have said is Kingston, I think, has always had its thing. A music scene has always been around here. But more recently, I think the developments have also made it an area where you just want to go with friends and family to have a pint by the river or enjoy a boat cruise through your services. It's just a lot nicer, the way they're developing the town in that sense, or aiming to develop the town in that sense. That's really cool. Nick, may I sort of switch gears on you slightly? Because, of course, working at Turks, I've got no doubt that you'll be more familiar with this than me, but I understand that it's one of the few still family-run businesses in Kingston, and especially one of the few that has something like a 300-year-old history in boat building and in operating these pretty spectacular fleets that we see there on the river. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? Because that sounds awesome.
So there is so much more than I can tell you, and I wish I knew. Turks could have a museum. There's always something which I find which is new. Richard Turk, it has been father to son for 300 years and more. I once spoke to him about it, and he said there's actually records going back of Turks on the river over 500 years.
Wow.
But officially, it's 300. Well, 300 and I don't know, 8 now. Can't remember when it was. It was 310. Maybe. Anyway, so the amount of history is really quite incredible. I learned something new the other day, because Kingston was very big in the aircraft manufacturing industry. As you know, like the Hawkers with the Hilton and that sort of thing recently has come out a bit more. But Turks actually built the floats for the Sopwith Camel seaplane, which I didn't know until recently. I just found it out by accident. Found a plan digging around in the back in the office, and there it is. All the film stuff we used to do. So Michael Turk, Richard's late father, one of his favourite stories he told me was having a bit too much to drink on the set of Moonraker, because we did the boat chase scene in Moonraker, and I'll be watching a movie, and sometimes I'll just sit and watch the credits, and it will come up, saying Turks Film Services. There's just so much. It's so cool.
Yeah,
sometimes.
That's incredible, and it's right here. That's what I think is really cool about it. As you mentioned, with all the history in boating, boat building, but also aviation, of course, which I think the engineering is probably naturally went from boat building to aircraft building because of the lightness of the structures and the material. So it's no wonder that sort of happened that way. That's really, really cool. And Nick, granted that we're recording this now in late June, and hopefully if this roadmap out of COVID and out of lockdowns continues as it is, hopefully not in the too distant future, all of our businesses will be able to start running back normally as it was before. Could you just tell us a little bit, with that in mind, with that sort of thinking in mind, about some of the services that one could enjoy through Turks River Cruises, for example?
So what you mean, what we provide?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's quite hard to plan without knowing. We're getting to the point now where we can start planning, but we thought that a little while ago. So sometimes in the back of my head, I start thinking about all of these options and ideas that we could do, and then there's a little niggle in the back of the brain that goes, yeah, but actually, do we want to do that yet? So we've recently invested in some barbecue boats. I don't know if you've seen these
on your website. I thought that was a pretty cool idea.
Yes, it is pretty cool. They're really good fun. They're surprisingly fun to drive. I drive quite big boats, so I was quite actually surprised at how much I just want to drive the electric boat around the Thames and just go around making burgers and stuff. So they're really good fun. And we've got a picnic boat coming as well, which is going to be slightly smaller. As you will also have noticed, if you spend any time on the river, the self-drive has exploded in the last few years, which is great, because one thing which I feel quite strongly about, and it's what I also quite like about running a passenger boat business, is not everyone, actually very few people can afford to have their own boat and enjoy the river. And the self-drive business industry gives people just a little bit of taste of that. And our passenger boats give people the opportunity to go on the river and enjoy a day out. I just think that's quite an important thing. So that's a really cool development in the business recently. And we're just
I like that a lot.
Oh, sorry.
I know, I just said I like that a lot.
Yeah, we've always been about ensuring that we can get as many people safely on the boats from all walks of life as possible. I think we're quite affordable as far as boat trips go and as far as experience goes. So that's something which I feel quite strongly about. And then we're looking at, we started doing before COVID, like afternoon teas and roast on a boats. So looking at doing like bottomless brunches and that sort of thing. So I think everyone feels that there's going to be hopefully a bit of a boom when we're all allowed out to play properly, and just trying to appeal to many people as possible and grow the business and give people a different experience on the river.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. And, it's interesting because I came across your company when I first came to the area, and our company had joined not too long before I joined the company. Our company itself joined the Kingston Chamber of Commerce. And I remember vividly, this is about 3 or 4 years ago now, a networking event that happened, and I believe it was on your boat called the New Southern Belle or something. It's quite iconic. I see it in the river every now and then. And it was a great networking event because, one, we got to hear, and it might have even been you that was the skipper on the day, Nick, I don't know, but we got to sort of see some highlights from the river, but also what a place to just have a networking meeting where suddenly you're not in some sort of closed in conference room or something, or a hotel. This is like you're out and there's stuff happening around you, and there's a river, there's nature. So the conversation just seemed to have flown in a way that maybe in a normal setting, i.e. a hotel lobby or something, it just wouldn't have flown the same way. So I applaud you guys for having those different services in that way, because you're absolutely right. Not only does it give more people the chance to experience your services, your boats, the river, but you can be creative with it. You can be creative as to how you could be a patron of your services for the benefit of maybe clients, or, like I said, a congregation of local businesses or what have you. So that's really cool. Nick, what are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
That's quite a tricky one to nail down, really. Just adaptability probably is, from the top 5 rules of running your own business. Adaptability, constantly working. Yes, it's having motivation and having people around you who can pick you up when you're struggling. My small team at work, we say that we're on a roundabout, and you've got the entrance and you've got the exit, and some are good, some are bad, and you'll each going around the roundabout at different times. And when one of us is having a bad day, the other one's having a good day. So from a business point of view, having the right people in the right place and paying them the right wage to do that, we've actually put wages up. Because we want people to, we're trying to go for a better culture. Not that it was particularly bad before, but me especially, I never thought that I would have my job would be at risk of redundancy. Didn't see it coming. And I think it was a massive wake-up call for a lot of people my age. Part of the boom years, everyone had a job, everyone's got a job, everyone's money, yay, But having that rug swept out from under your feet, I was always a hard worker. We had a lot of good people that worked for us, but we just had to make sure that everyone understood the risks involved, and clarity as well. Making sure that the staff there's no point trying to hide it. Trusting them is a big factor.
Huge factor. I second every single one of those key business lessons you've mentioned, and I think more than the others, just because of what we've been going through over these last 12 to 15 months. That adaptability thing is huge. Almost never not having your ear to the ground to sort of feel what tremors are going on. Although, of course, none of us could have ever predicted anything like this. I mean, that's out. But nonetheless, the adaptability of, well, we're here now, what do we do? Huge, absolutely huge. And I appreciate you sharing that. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
Is that from like a personal point of view or from a business point of view?
Can be both.
So without getting too what's the word? Too deep, maybe. I'm quite proud of actually just getting my boatmaster's license. I spent most of my 20s not doing much useful with my life, and finally realizing that something I wanted to do and achieving something was actually quite a big factor for me. I'd never really attempted something and then managed to do it of any note. So that was quite good for me from a personal point of view. I'm very proud of what me and the guys and girls who work at Turks now have achieved in the last year. Actually, it was hard not having any money to try and work on the boats and fix them up and keep them looking good and keep them running and pay wages. The fact that we've actually got this far, I think, is commendable. But that's definitely not just me. My colleagues who were there. We were lucky and grateful to have the opportunity to keep our jobs and to do this first and foremost. So just surviving, probably.
Yeah, no,
sadly, it's probably enough at the moment.
Look, I know exactly what you mean, and as we've mentioned before here on this conversation, hopefully this COVID thing is starting to get behind us for good, and there's exciting times ahead for you guys, especially with that barbecue boat for sure.
I mean, there's a couple of cool things. We were part of the Queen's Jubilee, back in 2012. That was really cool to be a part of, to have the boats in there. We were part of the torch procession for the 2012 Olympics as well. That was really cool. So there's a couple of highlights in there from throughout the years of stuff that I've really enjoyed doing, and it's fun.
Very cool. As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you some quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in.
All right.
So Nick, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
I like reading.
Excellent. Well, are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Unless I've got a penchant for fantasy series. So I like escapism. So anything which is otherworldly is quite good, because it means that I like to read things which I find it very hard to relate back to my average day, because all I end up doing is thinking about work. So your classic Tolkien type of thing is really good. Brandon Sanderson, for anyone who does like fantasy, Brandon Sanderson is a cracking writer with some cool themes. It's quite hard to find actually things which are new in the fantasy world, because it's all wizards and dragons and stuff, but he's actually managed it, which is cool.
Wow, excellent. That's a cool tip. And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Depends how old you are. So I've actually just finished watching Black Summer Series 2 on Netflix. So again, with the escapism theme, I quite like apocalyptic stuff or dystopian type themes. Again, it's something which I find very hard to relate to today, although with the pandemic, maybe sometimes not anymore. But yes, we are not under constant threat of zombies, which is nice. But yeah, Black Summer was really intense and quite different as well, when the apocalyptic zombie theme has been very overplayed in the last 5 to 10 years. Actually, again, finding something which is relatively new was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Also, it's not new, but I'm also a bit of a Trekkie. I'm now coming across as a massive geek, so I have been rewatching some of the Star Treks. yeah, that's pretty cool. And every now and then I catch it on when you're just scrolling through. I almost never scroll through channels, but every now and then I do, and then you hit on a cable channel that has Star Trek on or something. That each episode is just so good at bringing you in. They just suck you in, and you've got to watch it. They know what they're doing there. They know what they're doing. Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business? Come along and have a boat trip, meet the team, go on the website, but come along and meet us. We've got some really good reviews recently. So we've got a cracking team together. Some of the guys and girls that are working for us at the moment, I like to think our level of customer service has only got better, possibly as people get more grateful for their jobs. And we're just, that first time we had passengers on the boat, it was awesome. Just come along and meet us. We're nice people, we like to think, and hopefully we'll give you a good boat trip. For sure. And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I put the link to your website on the show notes. Nick, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story. Thank you for having me.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.